Hello everybody and welcome to this final video which is looking at the remaining strategies which we can use to support growth and development. In the last two videos what we focused on was market orientated strategies about promoting the free market and people to invest and competition. We also looked at interventionist strategies in another video as well, looking at what governments can do, how they can intervene more to help people improve both growth and development. What we're going to be looking at in this video are something we call other strategies, but also looking at the role of international institutions as well as the work of NGOs across the world. Right, the first one we're going to be looking at is something that we call the Lewis model. Now, the Lewis model is all about industrialization. What we know is in many developing economies across the world, most of the work is stuck in what we call the traditional society. It's in the primary sector. So we're looking here at agriculture generally. So people working on farms for a living. Quite often these people are subsistence farmers. So they're working on farms, they're growing food and then they're eating it themselves. And any spare food is sold at market. This work tends to be really, really low productive work. You also tend to find that the workers on the land are often underemployed. So there isn't sufficient work for them to do around the farm to generate a full-time income. There might even be lots of people on the farm that have no work to do, they're unemployed. Right, now what the Lewis model would suggest is we've got to try and transfer these people away from the traditional agricultural sector towards the manufacturing sector. With the logic being if we can get people into the manufacturing sector, these people will be working in more capital intensive work, using more machinery, tends to be more productive and therefore better paid work. So a good example is Bangladesh, getting people away from rice production to working in the big cities in the textile industry. So governments here should focus on policies that are designed to create industry-led growth. In other words, try and develop key manufacturing industries across the economy. So you've got to be looking at what skills have your rural sector workers got. How can we transfer those into more manufacturing based work within the urban sector? Now, this gives you an idea of the benefits of this. Many developing economies start off with a very, very small manufacturing sector. So most people are stuck in the traditional agricultural sectors and low paid work where you have lots of underemployment and unemployment. The idea would be that the manufacturing base will be originally really, really small. But if we can grow that, then the economy will both grow and develop. So the idea will be if we can transfer some workers into the manufacturing base, it means that wage rates start to grow, people are more productive, they're earning more money, they're spending more money, which creates economic growth and more jobs. And the plan will then be these people have now got increased abilities to save. And that means that banks can reinvest that money back into the manufacturing sector to help expand the sector even further. That would therefore allow more workers to leave the traditional sector, move into the manufacturing bases. Again, wage rates grow, we've got more people employed in more capital intensive, more productive work that can save more money, and that can lead to the manufacturing sector growing again. And what we've done, we've helped diversify the economy. We've expanded a new industry within these economies. And this can also then help the agricultural sectors, because as the manufacturing sectors grow, it means that people are earning more, they can afford to buy more food from the agricultural sector. The agricultural sector therefore get more money for their food, they can generate more incomes, they can now invest into better capital on their farms, and they also become more productive. Now this sounds brilliant, and there are lots of big benefits of it, but one big problem of this is this often leads to massive numbers of people leaving the rural sector to go live and work in the big cities. So in Bangladesh, for example, we've had an explosion of people moving from the rural countryside where wages are poor, searching for better paid work in the manufacturing sector in the capital city, Dhaka. What that often leads to is the creation of slums. So these people, when they move to the big cities, there's nowhere for them to live. The infrastructure is very, very poor, which means that the city cannot cope with the massive influx of people. So you've got to make sure that alongside developing the manufacturing sector, you're also investing into expanding the cities so they can accommodate all these extra people that are wanting to flood there. Right, what I would now like to do is just to pause and put down these two questions and your answer. How does the Lewis model suggest economy should grow and develop? And what are the potential flaws to this strategy? So again, hit pause, put down your answers. Once you've done that, if you can hit play, please. Okay, now another strategy which some economies across the world are keen to develop is use of tourism. And this could be a really, really good way of developing both growth and development. Many developing economies across the world, they exist in parts of the world that are very, very warm. So they've got very good climates. They might have lots of beautiful wildlife. So I'm thinking safaris in Africa. They might have beautiful coastlines, beautiful geographical features, which should really be really, really attractive to tourists from richer countries. So if we can develop these industries in these economies, then tourists should flood into these countries. So if poor African economies can attract millions of Europeans, Chinese, Japanese, American tourists to come into their country, then these people come and they spend money. And this allows these poorer people to access lots and lots of foreign currency, which can then be used to buy lots of foreign imports in their economy to boost access to capital, technology, and improve their country. Now, further to this, if lots of foreign tourists come into these countries, then it would attract lots of multinational firms. They're going to come in to want to build airports, hotels, infrastructure, tourist attractions, and that would lead to a big growth in jobs, but also in terms of GDP for these countries. Now, what's great about these jobs is you tend to find that for these people who are low skilled in these countries, jobs in tourism also tends to be low skilled. So these jobs are highly accessible, you know, working in hotels, etc., for the local people. And if these people are now employed, there's more tax revenue coming in, which will ultimately mean that we can support further growth and development because the government have now got a bigger tax base in the country as well. What tends to happen is, though, that these tourist holidays tend to be very income elastic. So in booms, you're going to get a huge growth in demand for these, which means that, you know, these industries will do really, really well when the global economy is booming. But in recessions, these industries will suffer significantly. Some of the problems of this, though, well, the first one would be that when people from America or Europe go on holiday to these countries, they're going to be able to demand, or they want to demand, the things they can buy back home. So British people will demand European beer. Americans will demand European products or American products. And that means that a lot of the export is the foreign currency these countries are earning is then being used to buy imports of foreign beer, foreign foods to service the foreign tourists that come in. You've also got lots of external costs. If you've got more cruise ships and more planes and more foreign tourists, they're going to destroy the natural environment. They're going to create lots of emissions and pollution, which could lower living standards. You've also got changes in fashion and taste. So some regions might become popular, you therefore grow and develop it, but then 10 years later, the tourists then move on to different countries across the world. So, you know, you've got to think, can we create long-term tourists coming to our country? Possibly not. And finally, the employment is often low skilled, so it's going to be low paid, and it's also seasonal. So people tend to go to these economies when the weather's warm, but they don't tend to visit all year round. So you might get very seasonal unemployment and erratic employment for the people through these tourist industries. Right, now I want you to now pause and think about this question. Do you believe tourism is a viable growth and development strategy? Try and put down arguments yes and no and make a judgment. Once you've done that, can you please hit play and we'll carry on. Okie dokie, right, another strategy that economists could follow is simply to develop primary industries. So the idea is that if your economy is good at growing tea, if it's good at digging oil out of the ground, good at growing tobacco, well, do that. So what we should be doing is in effect putting all of our eggs in one basket. So the logic would be, if we're really, really efficient at growing coffee, chopping down trees, do that. And then focus on developing that key industry. Because the logic would be, if you're good at doing that, there'll be high demand for those exports across the world. And that would mean that you're going to be allowed to earn more foreign currency, create more jobs. But also on top of that as well, those export earnings can then be used to buy imports of things that you haven't got in your economy, which can lead to better living standards if you can import better food and better machinery from richer countries across the world. Those export earnings can also then be used at a later date to help diversify the economy. So if we get rich by exporting coffee or oil, we could use that revenue to develop new manufacturing industries in the country. Now, a problem with this strategy, though, is something we call Dutch disease and the resource curse. The Dutch disease is dead simple. If we have a massive growth in demand in a country for our primary products, let's say it's coffee, that means across the world, more and more people are demanding that currency so they can buy that coffee. Now, what this will do, if we've got a massive surge in demand for our exports linked to coffee, it would lead to the currency getting stronger. And as the currency gets stronger, the exports of that country become less competitively priced. So it might help that the oil reserves are growing, or that coffee or tobacco production's increasing export earnings. But if that's pushing up the currency value, it's making it more difficult for a country to develop other industries because they now become less competitive when we try to export those things across the world. Linked to this is something called the resource curse. And what you tend to find is that countries that rely on natural resources often have very low growth and development. Now, some of the reasons for this are linked to it prevents investment in other industries. So if you're focusing massively on digging oil out of the ground or chopping down trees, it means that all your resources are going towards that one industry. It's preventing that diversification of the economy into other industries across your country. Further to that, you tend to find that if the natural resource is very valuable, you have lots of civil wars where people fight to gain control of those natural resources. Another problem is multinational firms might buy out that natural resource, and they're the ones that earn all the profit from that particular industry. This happens a lot with things like diamond production, where big foreign firms come in, they say, right, we're going to buy that industry, and they generate all the profits from those diamonds. So guys, Dutch disease is where exporting more commodities will raise demand, but it makes your currency stronger. And that could mean that you struggle to export other things from your economy. And the resource curse is where reliance on natural resources often leads to lower levels of growth and development. Right, again, what I would now like to do, please, is to jot down your answers for question 3. If you're unsure of the answers, go back to the previous section in the video, watch it again, but make sure you've got some good answers down for these 2 questions. Right, if you can now hit pause, please. Right, welcome back. Now, the next strategy, which can be used to support growth and development, are fair trade schemes. So this is where across the world, different organisations will say to developing economies, we guarantee you a price above the market price for the products that you sell. So this could be going to cocoa producers in Ghana. We're going to give you a higher price for the cocoa that you produce. Well, that allows these people to earn more money. They've got more price stability. They know what they're going to get paid for their crops. And that money could then be used to fund investment into better capital to further boost productivity in these countries. So it's about helping out developing economies by giving them a price above the market price for the crops that they're producing. Now, some of the problems with this, though, would be, well, how much do prices actually go up by? You tend to find that the price that people pay in rich countries for fair trade products might go up by 20%, but only a very small proportion of that has actually been passed on to the producer in the first place. So you might pay an extra 30p for a fair trade chocolate bar. Well, maybe 1 or 2p of that might go to the farmer. So it might have a very limited impact on the actual people that produce the product in the developing economies. So you might find that the retailer or the manufacturer in the rich countries benefits more than the poor old farmer in the first place. What it also does, though, it drives up supply. It's incentivizing more people to move into these industries. And that might mean that some of the suppliers that might not be in the scheme are forced to accept lower prices even further for the products that they're producing. So again, some good things, some bad things about this. Aid. What we could just do as rich countries, we could just say to poorer countries across the world, here you go, have some money, or take these loans at very low interest rates. Now look at the arguments for aid. If richer countries pass on money to developing economies, that money can be used to tackle absolute poverty, inequality. It could be used to invest into these countries that can access more foreign currency, buy more capital, create more businesses, or it could simply be used to build infrastructure, or it could be used to improve human capital. So all that money could then be used for lots of interventionist growth strategies in these countries, or to provide the fund for businesses to grow and invest. Some problems though, you tend to find that some of the world's poorest economies might become aid dependent. They become so reliant on the aid that they become inefficient because of it. And this is moral hazard. So where's the incentive to better yourself if you are constantly receiving lots of foreign aid? Other problems, you've got corruption. So it's possible that when this aid is sent over to these economies, the governments don't reinvest it back into helping people. They use it to line their own pockets and the pockets of their followers. That could lead to more inequality and create further problems across society. Now, this money might also be a loan. It might not be free money. And if it's invested poorly, you've got those interest repayments to make, which can create huge problems in terms of repayment plans going forward for these economies. Finally, as well, though, you could argue that if aid comes in from America, that money could be used to exert economic and political pressures over poor countries. So we might give a big ton of money to an African country, but then we might dictate to them what they spend that money on. But also we might expect favours back in return, like preferential access to their crops or their land resources. It's often used as a way of exploiting poorer economies across the world. Right, going on. Debt relief. What we know is that some of the world's poorest economies have got very, very high levels of national debt. Now we call these the heavily indebted poor countries, the HIPCs. The idea is if you've got lots and lots of national debt, you're stuck in a debt trap. You're going to struggle to borrow because people are worried about you not being able to repay. And that might force a country to have fiscal austerity measures in order to repay that debt. But that's lower government spending and higher taxes. So this could, lower growth and development even further. So the idea of if we were to cancel debt, then what we're doing, we are allowing that economy to then increase spending because they no longer have to service debt, and maybe even lower taxes, which can fuel more growth and development in these countries. Again, there you've got moral hazard. If we cancel debt, these countries might just go and borrow more money from somebody else, and then that whole vicious cycle starts again of a debt trap. Right, okay, what I would now like to do, please hit pause, put down these questions and your answers. Once you're comfortable with these 3 different growth strategies, hit play, please. Right, moving on towards the end, everybody. NGOs are another source of growth and development. So these are often non-commercial, so they're not profit-seeking organisations. These are in effect global charities. And you've got some of the different examples here. Oxfam is a big British one. We've got Save the Children as well. And what these guys will do, they will generate or raise money in rich countries, and they often then reinvest it back in to developing economies across the world. So this could be building wells or better water supplies in developing countries across the world. A big problem with NGOs, though, is that often their funds are quite limited. So the impact they can have can be quite limited. And also, these charities will often not be able to stick around for a long time in one country. They've got lots and lots of different countries competing for their aid. So it's difficult to keep that going long run as a growth strategy. Now, just to end things, you've also got these international institutions, the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. Now, these global institutions have also got a big emphasis on promoting growth and development across the world. The World Trade Organization promotes trade liberalization, so they could help developing economies export their products into richer economies across the world by encouraging rich countries to remove protectionist policies. The International Monetary Fund often provide loans and support, that could be expertise and advice, to developing economies to help them tackle poverty, but also what they can better do to promote better stability across their economy. The World Bank will often again provide loans. So this could be loans to help countries fight poverty, promote growth and development. What the World Bank often does, though, it forces these countries that take the loans into adopting free market strategies. So, more trade liberalisation, removing protectionism, allowing more foreign investment into their countries. Now, just to end this video, everyone, what I would like you to do is to do a little bit of research. I've given you here the website for the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and two really big NGOs. If you go onto their websites, it will give you a really good idea of some of the things they're currently trying to do to promote growth and development across the world. What I would like you to do, please go to each website and write down one or two different things that these organizations are doing to promote better growth and development across the world. Right, guys, that is the end of the video, so I'm going to click stop there. Thank you very much.